Welcome to Careers in Discovery, your window into the world of biotech leaders. On each episode, we interview the industry's leading executives to understand how they built their careers, what they've learned along the way, and the advice they'd give to their younger selves. This week, I'm with Volker Herrmann, CEO of Sonata Therapeutics. Volker and I talked about the moments in his career that led him to question the traditional approaches in medicine, which then sparked thinking about biological judo, or reprogramming diseased cells to fight illness. Alongside that, Volker talked to us about the importance of authenticity, purpose and impact, maintaining a strong sense of urgency, and building a purpose-driven culture in your company. This week, I am delighted to be joined by Volker Herrmann of Sonata Therapeutics. Volker, welcome to Careers in Discovery.
Hey, Tom, really excited to be here today. Really looking forward to our conversation.
We're excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. I've got to start, Volker, with Sonata Therapeutics and the question that you've posed yourself on your website because it intrigued me so much. What if the secret of health lies at the center of disease? Tell me about that. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, so was I. That question for you to know, Tom, and Joe know, actually, many people know that occurred to me when I was cooking a few years ago around Christmas time. And, I've been thinking a lot almost throughout my career as a cardiologist and then throughout my career in pharma and biotech. I was always puzzled by a certain question, which was, it's interesting. It seems like many diseases, especially those of high unmet need, are driven by a network, not by a single cell or so on, but really a kind of consortium of cells that are engaged in the initiation and progression of disease. And yet it seemed like as a cardiologist, which I was in my first life, as I like to say, but then also in research, we often still look at one player in that network and try to honestly think if we just kind of attack one of those players, that will be good.
Right.
And while I was cooking, it occurred to me, maybe there's a better way of doing this. And the perfect example, of course, became cancer. Because as we all know, and that goes to your question, cancer cells are very good in obviously kind of dominating and really kind of fine-tuning the microenvironment in their favor, turning down the immune system, increasing blood flow to the tumor and so on. The question became, well, could we not turn that around? And as I like to say, turn the villain to become the hero of the story. So could cancer cure cancer, right? And that really then became the question you were just referring to, which was, well, so what if we could really actually have the disease cell become the coordinator of cure? And that is literally what we do at Sonata. And we do that across a broad range of different diseases. And it's strikingly exciting. And I think it makes so much sense. And you're going to hear today a lot of excitement that I have for that approach and why that is.
Fabulous. So it's like biological judo.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Exactly. I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology. And so that's why I said, it's a bit like Greek mythology, right? So the villain becomes the hero.
Yes.
But then, of course, the hero kills the family. So yes.
Hopefully we can manage that part of the process. But it's all about reprogramming those disease cells. Is that correct?
So at Sonata, Tom, what we actually are interested in is indeed designing network medicines. And the network medicine, linked to what I just said, will always have two effects. It will always have a direct target cell effect. So in the case of cancer, we too like to kill cancer cells. That's obviously a good thing to do. But as you just said, we do it in a very specific way, which allows us to also reprogram the cancer cell as it dies to release a very specific set of signals, very much in line with what indication of cancer, for instance, we're interested in.
Yes. To
then engage all of the other necessary players, immune cells, endothelial cells, and so on, to come together and drive a very strong, innate, adaptive immune response to really cure cancer, which is and remains our aspiration.
That makes sense. And I can see, I'm guessing that would really help with the targeting, especially as the cells mutate. You can still target them because...
Exactly. And, I think the idea of saying instead of not just, but in the end, just targeting T cells or NK cells or macrophages, why would you not actually think it's a better idea to engage all the players in the immune system that we know will play a role, have to play a role to get a really strong, imminent and persistent response. And that's what we like to do.
Yeah, makes sense. I have lots of questions, but we're here to mostly talk about you, Volker. Maybe we'll come back to some of those
That's a
questions.
terrible thing, yes.
But so you've been there as CEO for about 4 years now.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little bit today at this stage of the company. What does your attention go on? Where do you spend your time?
Yeah, so I've been with Flagship and here Sonata as CEO for 4 years. I've been CEO and COO of some other biotech companies before. I would say throughout my entire career, we'll probably go and talk about that
Yes.
too. One of my number one priorities will always be talent and will be
Hmm.
people, because in the end, I fundamentally believe that if you want to be successful in a small biotech, in academia, in big pharma, it comes down to the team and the quality of the people you can attract and the talent
Yes.
you can attract to come and work with you. So attracting key talent and keeping them, I think, as engaged as possible and as empowered and as really kind of encouraged to do the work they want to do the best and the fastest they can is certainly a key area of priority.
Hmm.
No surprise to you, Tom, CEOs in biotech, investors, honestly, being out there
Yes.
telling the story, honestly, getting excitement for the company, raising money. I'm in Europe, as I just mentioned right now, for partnering discussions.
Hmm.
Partnering with the pharma company is a key area, of course, of what we do. But we also, continue to expand our activities. So we've started in cancer.
Yes.
And that's where we spent the last 2 years with Sonata. But now, for the last 9 months, we've also expanded into fibrosis because we think fibrosis is a great additional example of network disease.
Interesting.
Again, we think failure in fibrosis has been plentiful, unfortunately, devastating diseases. And we think it's a great example where many different cells come together, play together, and indeed finding targets and creating therapeutics that can tackle the entire network there will make a difference.
Mm.
And from there on, that's where I spent a lot of the additional time in talking to scientists and being out there in meetings, congresses, conferences. Tom, is really, where else would you think networks do not play a role, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
think about
absolutely.
degenerative disease, neurodegeneration, and so on. So a lot of my time also goes just in what's next for us.
Mm.
While, of course, first things first, we really want to actually kind of prove that we can do this. And so most important, we aim to be in the clinic with 2 of our programs within the next 12 months
Right.
in
Okay.
cancer. And so that, of course, is with regard to, organizational construct, key hires like a CMO, and of course, really lining that up, clinical trial indication, all of that is another key area of interest and
Yeah,
focus.
absolutely. It's an important year for you guys.
Yeah, a very
It's,
important year.
yeah, excellent. Um, we'll come back to Sonata and how you got involved and how you got involved with Flagship as well. But I always like to take it back to the very beginning, Volker. So
Kindergarten.
from
I like to talk about kindergarten days. Yes, I like that, Tom. That's
fabulous,
great.
fabulous. No, my understanding is that you pharmacologist and cardiologist by training originally. Tell us a little bit about why science, why medicine, why drug development, why this path for you, do you think?
Yeah. So we're not going to talk about the kindergarten, but we're going to talk briefly about my dad. So
Okay.
when I was growing up, my father was the head of R&D for a large American company here in Germany.
Hmm.
And so as a kid, I just got to spend some time making some money in the summer breaks, honestly, working in the lab, cleaning dishes, not doing any lab
Yeah.
work. But of course, talking to scientists and, getting an idea what they were doing there. And I got very intrigued and found that was very, very exciting and very cool.
Mm.
So when I graduated from high school, these were the good days in Germany, used to go to the army. So I had to do that. But I asked my dad, I mean, if in today's world you wanted to pursue a career in biotech or research or pharma, what would you study? And he didn't actually hesitate a second. He immediately said medicine, medical school.
Right.
Because he said, that is a degree that just will give you the ability to do almost anything in the industry.
Hmm.
You can do research, fundamental, basic, academia, you can do medical, you can do regulatory, you can do management, anything.
Yes.
So that was the idea why I went to medical school, Tom, basically. And turned out, I really enjoyed that tremendously. Had a very great time in medical school. I was very impatient.
Right.
Started in Freiburg in Germany, being German. Felt I didn't see patients early enough. I went to London to change that, went to Paris for 2 years, studied there, and then went to Michigan
Hmm.
in the end, which were great experiences. And to the extent that I really fell in love with seeing patients.
Right.
So a little change in plans. I said, okay, industry, research, fine. But I started, as you said, my training in cardiology and clinical pharmacology. So I always did both. I did see patients. I also always did lab work on the
Mm.
side. I had my own lab first in Frankfurt and then at UCSD in San Diego. And in San Diego, I was doing a lot of clinical studies for a company called Bristol Myers at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Their European president was a German gentleman who took me out for dinner one day and said, you know, just from your personality and who you are, what you do, if you got a master in business administration, you would be a star in industry. And said, oh, there's an idea. Let's, on top of being a cardiologist and doing research, let's get an MBA. So I got an MBA.
Okay.
And then I did go to my boss at UCSD and declared that I was indeed considering going to industry. He was shocked and said, fine, you're an idiot, but you'll be back in 6 months anyway. And it's all going to be good. Now, I never came back. We're still good friends, lucky enough. But I did indeed then jump over and started my career in pharma in 1999 at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. And, you know, started in indeed medical clinical role, but then pretty early on switched over just because lots of restructuring, lots of change at Pfizer in the early 2000s into more managerial roles, and became the head of the largest business unit in the German organization, which was the CNS pain franchise. Only 3 years after I joined. That was terrific because you had full oversight of the research, medical, regulatory, but also commercial, and all of that. And those were exciting times for us at Pfizer and CNS pain, right? These are the days of the COX-2 inhibitors. These are the days of Neurontin, Lyrica in epilepsy and neuropathic pain, Aricept for Alzheimer. So a lot of really exciting stuff happening. So I was on the way to become German country manager. That was all looking great. But then we restructured the organization completely.
I see.
And we had a new European president, Ian Reid, Scottish, as you know, looking out for money. And he rightfully said, listen, 27 countries, every country doing their own strategy, their own materials, their own marketing, sales, medical strategy, makes no sense. We're going to create 3 hubs in Europe, which will actually get 50% of all of the resources of the organizations, and they will do all of that on behalf of the country organizations, and the country organizations become customer facing. Well, I said, that's great. That makes the job of country manager significantly less attractive. That makes the job of a hub lead very attractive. No, the issue was every country with the 27 could apply to become a hub. So Paris, London, Brussels, Madrid. The German affiliate was in a city you have never heard about called Karlsruhe.
Okay.
It's a small little town in Germany nobody knows about. So it seemed pretty daring to run against London and Paris, but we put up a fantastic strategy, and indeed the hub became London, Paris, and Karlsruhe. And so that was an amazing experience, Tom, because in the end, I got to hire 300 people from 27 countries to come to that hub and form a fundamental new business model with regard to research, but also honestly everything else and strategy for the European organization. Funnest part about it probably learning how much culture matters and how much it takes to make 27 folks from 27 countries work productively together, and what's that we learned, especially if very polite, kind English meet a very direct Dutch or Germans. Lots of fun to be had, but it was an absolute wonderful experience. We moved that organization to London 18 months later, again, for restructuring reasons. And at that point, I was supposed to come over to, no surprise, headquarters in New York in a general manager role. But something really important had happened to me at that point, Tom, which was I loved everything we were doing. We were really creating, I thought, doing great impact drugs in many different diseases, in many different areas in which I worked. But I had spent a lot of time in CNS pain, which had partly personal reasons, family reasons, which I'd always have and still have a huge dedication to. And it just became clear to me that still with everything we were doing on the drug side and the scientific side, that the outcome and the impact we had on patients was still just very limited in many cases, right? Because there's so many other factors that play a role. So I came up with a relatively crazy idea, it seemed. I found it was time for Pfizer. This is 2010, 2011. Become a healthcare company, not just a pharmaceutical company. And what I meant by that was really, I said, there's so many other things we could do to improve patient outcome if we worked with payers, with health systems, the NHS in the UK, and really create other offerings. So I pitched to the leadership team of Pfizer to give me $100 million to create a service and solution business, which I don't think anybody in Pfizer, when I went into the room for a 3-hour discussion to ask for that, believed I would actually ever get, but I got money. And I got to create a new business for Pfizer, which was really this business. And it was absolutely, really one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. Got firewalled from the core business. It was all about going to, so I'll give you an example. You would go to United Healthcare in the United States. You would say, hey guys, you're spending $20 billion a year on chronic low back pain. I think you're getting really bad outcomes for your patients and you're wasting a lot of money. And here's a couple of offerings we've created that we would like you to implement to get a much better patient outcome, to save money. And if you do that, and we measure that really against the baseline, then I get 50% of that money that you save. But I don't care whether you use any Pfizer drug. So very innovative business model at the time. And it allowed me to work with people like, companies like Apple, Google, Qualcomm, psychologists, social workers, everything else to really look. So I'll give you an example of an offering, right? You may know that 20% of patients who undergo complete knee replacement do not benefit from the surgery because the pain is moved from the knee to the brain. And you can take out the knee, but the pain is still there.
Right, yes.
So that's bad for everybody. That's bad for the patient. That's bad for the health system. That's still good for the surgeon because they are being paid in America, at least, not in Europe, for operating. So we said, let's identify those 20% and do not operate on them. So everybody liked it, but the surgeons. So then we had to actually develop a cognitive behavior therapy together with Apple on the iPhone that the patient would do for 6 months and that they would benefit from the surgery again, right? And so there were a lot of these kind of offerings. And so that was a terrific experience because it was a global business from N of one myself to I call it my first biotech experience, really.
Right, yes.
To a couple of hundred folks there. Unfortunately, fortunately, it became pretty successful pretty quickly. And so then we had a discussion about, should it stay independent? Should it be reintegrated? I thought it should be independent. Some other important people at Pfizer didn't think so. And at that point, I just had really smelled that I wanted to be back into small biotech world, research, back to science, everything else. And so after a little additional stint in vaccines business for Pfizer, I actually then left and have now been in biotech for the last about probably 9 years. This is my fourth company. First was a small anti-infective company down in Raleigh-Durham. Then I came up to Boston for a very cool cell therapy company called Squeeze Biotech. I was the CEO and president, and then Flagship found me about 4 years ago, and I've been here as a CEO partner ever since.
Fantastic. And so it strikes me, Volker, from what you've said, that this theme of patient focus, of thinking about the experience of the patient, has been at the core of your career since you started seeing them back all those years ago. Is that fair to say?
That's super fair to say. That's so great observation. Yeah, no, that question I've been asked many times. That I miss seeing patients and why did I stop being a doctor? And it sounds a little cheesy. I get that, but the truth is I strongly felt that I could have more impact on patients and more patient lives in a more meaningful way in actually going into research and into industry than being an individual physician. I do miss seeing patients because I think it is a privilege to do that, and I truly enjoyed it. But I can honestly say, as I'm getting into the last third of my career, so I'm very happy to say I still feel the other part has also come through, which is, I think I've been lucky to have been involved in a lot of research and a lot of products that actually have made it to market and had huge impact on patients. And I've been lucky enough to be engaged with patients in many different ways and regards, and has been incredibly rewarding. But you're exactly right. Patient impact is and always will be what drives me more than anything else. And if you talk to people who work with me, will tell you it drives my sense of urgency. I want to believe I'm a pretty easygoing German. I like to have fun. I like to laugh. I like to honestly be really creating great work environments. But the one thing I have a limited understanding for is lack of sense of urgency. And that really comes from a fundamental belief that the patients out there are waiting. And like in the case of Sonata, I think if you have been given the privilege and have been lucky enough to stumble or have an idea or come across a biology that you think has the potential to have real impact, and really change the life of patients out there, then I think it's our job and our responsibility to do that as thorough, but also as fast and with a sense of urgency, honestly possible, the best we can. And that is driving me very, very, very vividly every day, every night, and
Yes.
every day on my drive to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's there for you all the time. And you've talked a bit about culture and creating the right culture, and I want to come back to that a little bit. But before getting into that properly, I think one of the challenges a lot of biotech companies have is keeping their team connected to that impact that they're trying to have, right? Because it's so far, especially when it's early research, it can be so far away from patients, and a lot of the team won't have treated patients. They won't have spent that time with them. Is there anything that you've done that you've found has been really useful for keeping people focused on that outcome?
Yeah. That's a really great question, Tom. And I give you an example. I had great learning in one of my first biotech companies around that, because, as you said, to me, sense of urgency and purpose. So purpose is, when we talk culture, I think purpose is a huge part of any company and any organization I run that I think is so important.
Yeah.
Because I think it is a privilege to work in the industry. No offense to anybody making cars or making Coca-Cola, that's all good and fine. But I think it is an incredible privilege to work in an industry where you work about really changing lives and saving lives of humankind out there, right? But to your point, I firmly believed, of course, it was obvious that everybody should relate, as I do, to that patient impact, and clearly that's obvious. Now, a few years ago, I was launching a culture override in a biotech company I just joined. And a big part of that was purpose and patient impact. And we did I did a check-in after about 4 or 6 weeks of the rollout, and we had a focus group of about 10 folks. And at the very end, a young scientist raised her hand and she said, Volker, I don't want this to come across wrong, but it's not the patient that drives me. I'm healthy. My patients are healthy. I've never been in the hospital, honestly. It's the cool science we're doing here that drives me. And that was a real big light bulb moment for me, Tom, because there you go. So purpose obviously comes in many different flavors. And so I still do a lot about purpose at Sonata right now, or any company. I do a couple of things to foster that. So I'll say 2 things. I've just launched, again, something I like to do, which is I like people to write a love letter to Sonata at least once a year.
Okay.
And honestly, I asked them to say, let's sit down and think really hard over a glass of wine or not. What do you love about being here? What is it that really makes this the unique place? Why you want to be here and not across the street at another flagship company and anything else? And if you're happy to send that love letter to me, I would love to read it. If not, you keep it to yourself. You want to share it with a teammate, that's great. Sooner or later, people will start talking about them, right? First round, first year, a little challenging, but they will. And I think it's really important, Tom, because, if you cannot write a love letter to the company you're working for, I think it's a problem. I will never fire anybody for it. It's not the purpose.
No.
But I will say, if working at Sonata is as meaningful to you as working at Pfizer or BMS or anything else, then I would want to have a productive discussion with you whether we can change that. And you really want to be here. And this is the company. This is the science. This is the indication that honestly gets you out of bed and drives your sense of urgency as much as it can.
Yes.
Or at least I want you to have that discussion. And I will say to my teams, listen, if you cannot find that in you, then I'm happy if you're doing a good job, if you have you, but I would also urge you to think, is this the place where you should be, where you want to be? Or is there another company, is there another lab, another place where you could actually be motivated better and do a better job? So that's one part of what I like to do. I still like to bring patients into the company.
Okay.
Because again and again and again, Tom, I've seen patient representatives, sometimes also patients. I like to encourage my employees to volunteer and work in hospital settings or other areas where they can engage with patients. And the reason is simple, Tom. I can honestly say I've not once seen a patient, a cancer survivor, a dying cancer patient engaging with young scientists who have not seen patients and not bring them to tears and not change their perspective on purpose and meaningfulness. And yes, the science may still be the key reason why they're there, but clearly their sense of urgency has changed right there as well. So to me, to do that and to do that in many different ways remains a key area of what I like to do, to just really drive that.
No, it
shared.
makes sense. I may steal that love letter idea. I think it's great because I think, we spend a lot of time with our clients looking at, well, how do you really engage people with the importance of what they're doing? And that's, as you say, that's all about purpose. And not everyone is going to be super passionate about what every company is doing. But if you can build a team of people who really do care and it really lights them up, then I mean, you can the things that you can do with a handful of
No,
those people are
I think
unbelievable.
it's really terrific. I give you one more, which I like to
Mm,
do. I love wall of purpose.
okay.
The walls of purpose is really so, and we just started that with Sonata as well. I've done that before in several companies. So I ask you, if you came to join Sonata tomorrow, I would say, hey, Tom, when you come on the first day, bring a photo or a drawing or a picture, whatever it is, that reflects why you're going to bring the best that you can bring to bear to
Hmm.
Sonata when you start working here, right? And I do that for every employee. And, as the company grows, first is 5 photos and you hang them in the, very obvious perspective
Yeah.
reception area or anywhere else. And, every once when you have a few new employees, you actually have a happy hour or a round of coffee and you ask them to talk about it.
Yes.
And in the end, what you see and what you get is, if you came as a visitor to Sonata, you're going to see a wall of, photos, pictures that can be honestly, parents, as it turns out, children, other loved
Yeah.
ones. It can be scientific, it can be whatever. But in the end, behind every photo is a story of why the people here will do the very best and the purpose. And you're going to see as a kind of depiction of graphic and photo, everything else, what
Yeah.
really is what is driving Sonata as a team and everything else. And I love the fact that if I have visitors and you walk around, you come by, I think finally everybody will say, oh, what's that? And it's just a great way of engaging and talking about the culture and honesty and purpose and everything else, what you want to do with your company.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And so you've got a group of people there who they're connected with their own reasons for being at the company. They're connected with the outcome, with the patients that are
That's
trying
right.
to help, but also then they're trying to do well for each other because they
Yeah,
understand why each other
exactly.
are doing it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
that
Yeah.
that
Right.
that compounds, I would expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. So yeah.
yeah, excellent. And you talked just on the topic of culture. You talked about this sort of bringing together of the team at Pfizer and the different cultures that you had to bring
Yeah.
together. So purpose is one thing, but then I guess kind of what you touched on is the communication part of it. How do you build a cohesive team from people with all
Yeah.
different backgrounds?
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in that. What are the things that you think are crucial beyond purpose to building a team that works effectively together?
Yeah. So I would say a couple of things there, Tom. One, I think, is really, as I've gone through my career, and I think you're never going to get perfect, and I'm certainly not perfect,
Sure.
but I think to be as good as you can be in selecting pretty ruthlessly the best talent you can get for starters,
Mhm.
and the best mix of talent and the best, really, everybody talks about that, right? And you and I know it's a hard thing to do.
Yes.
It's a hard
Yeah.
thing to do, to honestly do that. But I think it really has to start there, right? To be very thoughtful and very good in the way how you assess talent, how you assess, honestly, really the needs for the organization and do that. And of course, that links to the probably most important part, as we all know, and the one we all will continue to struggle every day, which is communication
Hmm.
in any regard, right? So, I mean, how do you communicate a clear vision and an exciting vision about the company that attracts people? But then when they're there, indeed, to your point, how do you make sure across different levels of the organization, especially as you grow? I mean, if you're 10 people, it's really easy for everybody to
Yes.
be pretty much in the mix. When you hit 40, 50, it's a bit more tricky, right? A bit more layers. Now organization grows, C-suite is getting bigger, you get 100. Now it gets a lot more challenging, right? And I think you have to be incredibly thoughtful as you go through that journey of growing your company. How do you continue to communicate
Mm.
two ways? And that's the really key part, right? I mean, of course, one way from your in the leadership, the CEO, your vision, but and again, changes. Why are we changing? How can you be as transparent, honestly, as you can be? But equally important, if not more important, how do you make sure you hear back, right? You hear the
Right.
concerns
Yes.
of the organization, honestly, very openly. And there, I just like to tend to be relatively creative in the sense of I do very frequent lunches with small subgroups of my organization. We do town halls, of course. We do focus groups. We do one-on-ones. We do fireside chats on topics beyond science that employees are engaged in. And, I think that is and has to be the number one priority. But I think it also really starts, Tom, with the clarity of the vision, because I always say, looking at the mountains in my background here,
Yes.
if you're not really clear about which mountain do we want to climb, you and I together, and how do we think we want to get there, and you and I agree. Because, I can say I like that mountain, I want to go up there, my idea is going there. But if you say I like the mountain, but your path is absolutely not mine, well, you and I know where that's going to end, right? So, I mean, I think it's where many companies go wrong. Running a scientific organization, I think another thing is really important, and I mean that and I take that very seriously, which is, climbing a mountain will take some thoughtful risk. Keyword is thoughtful risk.
Yes.
When you ask your scientists to take thoughtful risk, then I think linked to our culture discussion, celebrating success and failure is really important. And what I mean by that is not failure for dumb mistakes or anything else, but I cannot ask you, Tom, to say, Tom, I want you to be driven. I want you to honestly push the science. I want you to honestly see where can we take this. And then when you come to me and say it didn't work out, I say, gee, Tom, no, I gonna have to say, Tom, thanks for this. Thanks for taking the risk. Thanks for leading it.
Yes.
What have we learned? What are the learnings we have? Indeed, and that links into a learning organization, right? In the sense of saying, how do you do that? So celebrating success and failure, I think, is an absolute key aspect of doing that. And again, what that allows you to do and will do is also it will drive open communication. Because if an organization feels and sees that is the culture, that honestly you are not being punished if something goes wrong, yet you are awarded or not. If something goes well, guess what? You have transparency, right? People will come forward and will actually be forthcoming. And I think that is an absolute must in our industry. Truth and openness and transparency are honestly and have to be the key aspects of our businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember having someone on this podcast many years ago now, actually, who had run R&D groups at another big pharma company. And that he had implemented that they had a celebration every time they took a no-go decision on a program. It was a bit more subdued than the celebrations for progressing the programs. But the way he sort of framed it for his people was, guys, we've just saved millions and millions and millions of dollars by making this decision. So like you say, coming to that conclusion, positive or negative, is a step in the right direction, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thinking back to, I suppose, the journey through your career, Volker, if you were to encounter yourself perhaps leaving Freiburg or stepping into Pfizer for the first time, and you had the opportunity to give yourself one piece of career advice, what do you think that might be?
Can I give you two?
Sure, yes.
So I think one would be authentic and genuine. And I think that's really important, Tom, because I think if you're a young scientist, a young manager, and you start your career, it's obvious easy to look around and say, oh, there's Tom, cool guy. I mean, look at how he's honestly really likes him and the style, and that's I should copy Tom, right? And that guy's really, really successful and everything else. But I think the sooner you know and you understand who you are, what you really can stand for, and then you stand for it, it's probably one of the most powerful things you can do. In my career, I mentioned that I became business unit lead for the CNS pain franchise early in my career in Germany. I had a huge opportunity there to see the power of that immediately, which was, first meeting with thousands of sales reps, marketing organization, the entire organization, and I was faced with a pretty tricky situation, being asked not to communicate something to the crowd because it was still top secret with the company and everything else. Yet I had launched that meeting under a motto which was trust will conquer. So I said, that's great. If you now leave here and on Monday we learn honestly you didn't share the truth, there you go. So I did. And that prompted a lot of interesting discussion, but it prompted a complete change of culture and belief of the company in me, in the sense of being a manager who stands for what he says he will do. And I think that is something that is incredibly powerful. Be genuine, be authentic, do what you and stand for what you say you're going to do. And that will be so powerful. And you're going to have such really ability to influence people and have real impact, huge. And I wish I had learned that even earlier. And I see so many people struggling with that, I think that would be my
Yeah.
number one advice. The other one is make impact your compass and not how important you are
Okay.
or whether you have been heard or spoken, right? And what I mean by that, I use that a lot in mentoring discussions as well, is, sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes you may feel people are ignoring you, or honestly, you're being treated in the wrong way or anything else. But I think always ask the question, are you better off right now, honestly, going to war here, or actually make a fuss in the sense because a little ego was a little harm, versus what is really at stake here? And what are you really trying to accomplish? And maybe sometimes step back, breathe 3 times, do not say something stupid that will actually just cause uproar for the reason of uproar, but has zero or negative impact on what you're really trying to get to, I think would be my second advice. Impact has been a mantra and a compass in the sense of me and knowing when to speak, when to go to war, when not to go to war, in the sense of really saying, what is important. And that has served me really, really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a perfect point to end on. And I think, I completely agree. It's a really good way to run out of energy going to war over every little thing, isn't
That's right.
No,
Exactly.
Volker, there's so many more things we could have talked about, but it's been fantastic to talk to you. Best of luck over what is a critical period for you and for
It is,
Sonata.
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. It was really great fun. Really enjoyed that. Thank you so very much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe and share it with someone else you think will benefit. And for more podcasts, videos, blogs, and insights, come follow me, Tom Froggatt, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Medium, or TikTok. See you next time.